Cool.
Good. So how's it going, mate?
Yes, I'm very well, thanks, mate. You?
Yeah, all good.
Good.
I'm just going to make sure that it is actually live on the YouTube. Yeah, I've just got an email actually as well, so we are live.
All good.
So,
Nice.
Nurve, Raf,
Yes.
this track today,
Yes.
Centipede, is a... Well, first of all, before we go into that and we wait for people to come on board, let's get a bit into you and kind of a bit about you, where you've come from and where you're at as an artist.
Cool. So, started my journey in the late 90s. Started DJing. Started working in a record shop at quite a young age, 15, 16. Started playing in clubs. And I was playing a lot of jungle drum and bass, and that's what I grew up on. So, I spent about 5 years working in a record shop. Then in my early 20s, started to make grime because my friend said there's this new music we should get into, grime. So I started making a lot of grime as part of a crew called Macabre Unit, which some of you may know of. So rode that train for a few years, had some success, One Extra, Radio 1, done all the major stations. And then, in time, as a producer, because I started to probably produce in my late teens, wasn't very good at it because back then you needed quite a bit of money to buy some good equipment. So the equipment I had wasn't very good, and it was I suppose a representation of how my music sounded, to be fair. So I started making grime, and I started making it on the PlayStation. So once we got into that and I got into production more, I actually slowly, my sound started to change, and it wasn't grime anymore. So I started making dubstep. Probably like, I don't know, when dubstep kind of first come around, Maller and Scream and them guys were already kind of running away with it. But I kind of come in with a sort of different sort of sound palette, if you will, and tried my thing for many years, fell on deaf ears, and then hooked up with some people who were making stuff that I really liked, which kind of fused the whole drum and bass and neuro sort of sound, and done it at 140. So the likes of Biome, likes of Chapter, Subdrifter, and a few of the other guys like Endred, Versa, and our very own Occult as well. And off the back of that, I formed a label called Mud, Macabre Unit Digital. And that's been going now for about 9 years. We have just about to schedule number 56 release.
Wow.
And it's going really well. So yeah, that's me kind of in a nutshell. Where I'm kind of at now personally as an artist, I'm kind of more focused on writing drum and bass. I still class myself as a multi-genre artist because I do still turn my hand to other genres. I still write 140 stuff and dubstep stuff and occasionally techno, mainly drum and bass that I'm kind of focusing on because that's where, I don't know, it seems to just work for me right now. So my label Nurve Music that I set up recently, the back end of 2019, and it was specifically set up for me to just release my own music, really, with the Nurve Music stuff. With the drum and bass stuff even, because kind of at that age where I just want to get stuff out there. Trying to get signed to a big label. Yes, it's appealing, of course, and that's fine, but to chase that, I might not have no music come out for quite a while, and I don't really want to wait around. So Nurve Music's set up for me to do my thing. Mud is still going for the 140 dubstep. And yeah, that's me in kind of a jumbled up sort of fashion. But yeah, that's where I'm at. So yeah.
And this track here is, would you say, because I know you've always been into, so the track you're about to do a masterclass on, I would call it, without being fluffy, just neuro. It's for me, it's a very stripped back compared to maybe some of the modern day neuro, but it's just neurofunk, right? However you want to decorate that. And I know you've always been a fan of that sound. So would you say that kind of, I know you're not limiting yourself as a producer with regards to genres and stuff, but would you say this is more in line with where your heart lies as a producer and an artist?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, which kind of leads me to something else I was going to kind of mention, which was the backstory to this track. But I think to answer your question, I do feel very comfortable writing this sort of music. This is kind of really what makes me tick. I love this sort of sound, and it is, yes, it is neuro. It is quite stripped back, and it's a bit more rolling, and it's almost got that early noughties sort of sound, which is, I think like probably most of us, even if you weren't around to experience the early noughties sort of drum and bass sound, a virus sound, even if you're only 20 years old, you're still going to listen to that and think, this is amazing. It don't really get much better than this. And I think, both me and you, Andrew, were kind of living that, and that really imprinted on me as an artist. No matter what genre I made, apart from the grime, I couldn't really I didn't have the skill set to kind of spill that sort of sound into my grime, but the dubstep, certainly, the stuff that I did as Demon on Mud, was me just living out that whole noughties era, but at 140 as best as I could, that my skill set would allow me at the time.
Yeah.
So the backstory to this track, which kind of leads to that, actually. So this track actually started out as a techno track. It was just a little idea I had going on in my head, and I kind of got it going. Thought it sounded great. Come back the next day, thought this doesn't really sound too good, so I changed it up, done a little bit of sound design and whatnot, and it just kind of fell a bit stale. So I thought, okay, there's definitely something there. So I come back a couple of days later or a day later, and I switch the tempo to 140. And I had something going. Again, I got a little bit gassed. I thought, yeah, this is great. Come away, come back, same again. I thought, it's just not really cutting it. So I changed it again. I tried some other stuff. By this time, I've got about 3 or 4 boiling pots just blotted around, intros, ideas, and all sorts of stuff. And then I come back the last day, because I'm quite tenacious like that. I thought, there's something there. I'm not deleting it, because there is something there. I just turned the tempo to 174, bang, and it just clicked. And that kind of really sort of it kind of really hammered home the way that I'm approaching the whole releasing single side of things as well, where it's making me not settle for anything. Now, the stuff that I'm trying to make is stuff that I really, really like. Now, of course, as an artist, it does help if other people like your music, because no one's going to listen to it. But what the whole releasing singles thing is doing for me is I'm just not settling for other stuff, knowing that I've got 3 or 4 other tracks around it that will kind of carry it. So yes, what I'm making now, this track, regardless of whether people like it or not, for me, it's exactly what I want to be making, exactly what I'd wanted from this idea. So yeah, in like a really long sort of winded and windy sort of way, this sort of track is exactly what I really love making. Although I do try and experiment with different sort of sounds within drum and bass, but I always end up back here. So yeah, this is kind of where I'm at, and I've got another thing that I'm writing at the minute. That's kind of on a similar sort of vibe, conscious of the fact that I don't want it to sound like this track, and it won't. So yeah, this vibe is for me definitely at the moment.
Wicked. I'm going to do a few shouts of people that are locked in. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. We will have some time for questions. I won't get into those now. We'll let Nurve get stuck in just a few moments. But big shout out to Nate Lloyd, Raj B, Mandy K, Edis Sonkos, Easy, Kaom, Mr. Derek, DJ Crypt, Corrupt, Giles DeBoke, some familiar faces there, Soul Bouncer, and yeah, we will get into those questions in just a bit. Thank you for tuning in. Please do share the stream, because social media and algorithms make it very difficult. They absolutely cock block us, and this is something we're trialing out and we would like to be doing on a regular basis between all of us here at Education and Bass, all genres, all styles, just sharing that knowledge and giving you an insight into our workflows and how we do things across an array of different genres. Because for us, We don't care about sharing the secrets. We will give you everything we've got in our locker, because if we're all chefs with the same ingredients, we're not going to cook the same food. And you know what? Have our secrets, but just make sure you send us the demos first. And we will potentially release them on our labels.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I'm going to get Nurve to just get stuck into this walkthrough on a track called Centipede. It's coming out on May the 22nd on his Nurve Music label. Keep an eye on that. It'll be all the big digital platforms, Spotify and all that good stuff. And please do check out the previous releases as well. As he mentioned, he does get into different kinds of genres and styles and doesn't restrict himself as an artist. And yeah, one thing is guaranteed, and that is quality production across the board. So I'm going to hand over the reins to Nurve. Please, again, feel free to drop your questions in the comments as we go along, and tell a friend. Thank you.
All good. So I think we'll start with the drums. Now, I've got these two white channels here, so ignore them for now, because I will get to them. There's a reason why they're there. Some of you might be familiar with it already. If not, I will explain. So the drums here, I will pre-warn you, I've had to flatten and freeze a few channels just to alleviate the strain off my CPU a little bit. Plugins should open fine, but if they take just a few seconds longer than they should, then
Raf.
It's because I do, yeah.
Oh, did you hear me?
Yes, mate.
Oh, that's all right. Don't worry. Cool.
I thought I was doing something wrong then. I thought, what have I done? Yeah, so I'm just going to just kind of go through these drums to start with. And yeah, you know, if some of the plugins are a little bit slow and stuff, it's fine. They will open. Just bear with. So cool. Let me just get these down here a little bit. So I'll solo the drums. And there's not a great deal in there. You know, we've got 6 channels. I'll go through each of them individually.
Actually, sorry, mate. One second.
Yeah.
Should we give them a blast of the track as it is its entirety first?
That's very true. That's very true. How rude of me.
Sorry, mate. I didn't think of that one.
No worries. All right, here we
So
go.
we'll give you a blast of the...
Yeah, so this is the track from start to finish, or pretty much. We'll go through it. So I'll play it from the top. Yeah, so it kind of just rolls out from there with another sound introduced, but for you kind of get the gist of what the track's about.
I think people in the chat were loving that.
Cool. Thank
Someone
you.
said they just melted. Soul Bouncer saying sick. Who was it said they just melted? Ahoy, matey. Very viral. I melted. Funky Slurch.
Good stuff, mate. I'm glad you melted. I hope you you unmelt and are able to continue existing. Good stuff. So yeah, you know, this is the stuff that really makes me tick. I really love making this sort of stuff, sort of techie neuro rollers. So yeah, we'll start with the drums. You know, as I said briefly before, they're quite minimal for this sort of track. The bass and some effects that are on the basses and stuff kind of carry it forward. So the drums needed to be kind of stripped back. But we'll just start with the kick drum and I'll just talk you through them. So the kick drum here. Lovely kick drum there. And this actually is just a sample that I located. It's in the drum rack. I put a lot of my drums in the Ableton drum rack. I used to work in audio a lot, but for some reason I kind of like them being in the drum rack. It gives me a lot more to kind of play with in regards to like, you know, some parameters, transposing. You can assign stuff to macros and it's good fun. In this track, I didn't really do that much of that, but that's why I work with the drum rack. So it's got mono utility. Now, the kick was in mono, but you can never totally trust it. So I always put a mono utility after kicks and snares just to make sure, you know, if I do want them in mono, of course. So I've got the EQ. And EQ's had quite a bit dipped out of it. And if I just turn the EQ on and off, it's quite subtle, really. So that's with it on. So, you know, it's not really got, you can't really tell a lot, but it just needed them kind of sort of areas kind of taken out and stuff. I do sculpt the kick drum when I've got the bass in there. I won't just EQ that out, just listening to the kick drum. No, it's when it's kind of sitting with the, you know, the bass and the other basses and just making sure. I do a lot of this sort of EQing anyway to balance the sound, because you'll find that, you know, here and here, there was some spikes there, no doubt. So if I just turn these notches off, you can see one here. I just wanted to kind of remove, and it just balances it a bit. And then we've got a compressor as well on the kick. Some might frown upon this, but I do this quite a lot. So the attack right down, the release right down, 4:1 ratio. And I usually like to have around 4 dB of compression on the kick. And it just kind of tucks it in for me. This compressor that I use is very transparent. And I really like what it does. So it's not really coloring it in any way, but it's purely just to contain it a little bit. Again, just to add to the sort of subtractive EQ inside that I'm doing here. I just feel that it balances it a bit. I do the same with my snare as well, which you'll see, to give it that kind of cohesiveness and consistency between kick and snare. So that's pretty much it for the kick drum. You know, the pattern, of course, you know, there's some edits and stuff in and out of transitions, but the processing of it is quite simple. I think if you find a really nice kick drum to start with, then you shouldn't really having to be doing a lot to it. You know, if you like the kick drum as it is, it's just about getting it to sit in the mix, and that's the main thing. That's why these processors are here. So move on to the snare quickly. So So if I just play them both together, the kick and the snare. Now the snare is very synthetic and very pokey, and you know, when you listen to it on its own, it's not the greatest snare in the world. It's you know, it's very short and snappy. But again, for this sort of track, that's all I kind of wanted it to do. And this is a preset in the operator. It's called Snare White, which I use quite frequently, sometimes as a layer on top of other snares, but in this case, I just used it as the snare itself. So after that, I've applied some transient shaping, which I use the Native Instruments one. This is quite good. It's really clean. So the attack stayed the same, but the sustain is what makes it snappy. So I've pulled that right down. So if I turn that off, you know, it just takes that kind of excess sort of, I don't know, some sort of just sustain off the end of it that I didn't want, because it can be quite intrusive when you've got a lot of quite fast and intricate sort of sound. So I just want the snare to just do exactly what it's meant to do and not kind of have some like overlapping sort of transients and stuff. So that's why that's like that. And we've got the here as well. So this is quite cool. Let me just make this a little bit smaller and put it on medium. So what I've done here is I've cut everything out from like 170 hertz. So there's no low end. I usually cut stuff right as close as I can to the fundamental frequency, but I don't brick wall it, because if you do, like if we change this to brick wall, you get this kind of weird sort of humming. It just doesn't sound very nice. So if I just turn the EQ on and off and then on, so with that there, it's that notch there boosting that fundamental, just giving it the body. Now this snare, I believe, because it's a synthetic snare, the reason that I like to use snares that are sometimes inside a synth is because when I play it in a certain key, it's actually in that key, because it's made up of a waveform. So I work in E flat minor, so that snare is in E flat, which I know that because this fundamental frequency is in E flat. So when I've boosted that, it's giving it a lot more kind of body, which is what I wanted. I've also gone an octave higher and boosted that frequency as well. And again, it's just to give it a bit of body. And then I've just shaved off the high end, because I kind of like my snares to be a bit kind of just not too bright. It's very easy to get kind of caught in that, you know, a snare being nice and bright and whatnot. But I like them to just be, again, just not intrusive to the track. So just move on to the compressor quickly. And it's got exactly the same setting as the kick. So there's about 4 dB gain reduction. Sorry, 4 dB of compression even. So if I just turn that off. So yeah, it's just you know, kind of tucking it in. This is a cool tool that I use called the Resonator. It's by the developers of Phase Plant that are called Kilohertz. And this resonator basically puts like a resonance underneath whatever sound you apply it to. So the reason I put it underneath the snare, if I just turn it off, it's just adding a little bit of body, because it's in 2 octaves lower than what the fundamental frequency of the snare is. So what I'll do, if I just remember that that's on 30% and I boost that, you'll hear. So you can hear that resonance. It doesn't sound great there, obviously, but if you put it down, it's just adding like a little bit of a lower sort of tone, you know, to the snare. Again, it's just thickening up the snare a bit, you know, because it's quite a thin and pokey snare. So I had to, like, you know, bring some body back into it. And then we've got the Verb Suite Reverb, which is the Slate Digital Reverb. And this is quite, I think it's just really subtle. Yeah, it's ever so subtle. I really struggle with reverbs on drums. I like my drums to be quite dry, unless I'm doing some sort of transition edit or something where I really just overcook it and open it up. But yeah, it's just a very light reverb layer. And then after, I've also put an EQ after the reverb as well, which I seem to have just gone crazy on the EQ again. So what usually happens is I'll EQ the snare, I'll process it very heavily, and then find that all of the processing has brought out different artifacts that I don't really want in the snare. So I have an EQ at the end of the chain as well, just to pull it all back in. Now that's not premeditated. I just let my ear guide me, and when I've got the rest of the track in context and the basses, you know, I'll start dipping these frequencies out. So yeah, that's it for the snare. For a little pokey snare, it's quite a lot's gone into it, but it's just sometimes how it is. So this is it. Let me just cool. So these are my rides. These are kind of like a bit of a signature sort of thing for me. So I believe, again, it's just a sample, and here I have actually automated these rides. So if I just open up here, pitch. So yeah, you can see here where I've drawn in some automation. What I've done is I've assigned the transpose, the pitch of the hat, to a macro, renamed it pitch. And if we just solo them, you'll hear. And it's just a little cheeky little sort of transition edit that you probably wouldn't hear in context, but you know, it adds something. So the way that I create these sort of grainy, kind of shakery sort of rides. So I'm just going to turn off all of these. And I think Trash 2 is probably playing a big part in it. As you can hear, that is just a ride, a delicate little ride, delicate little lamb of a ride. So I'll turn on Trash 2, and that's where you're getting all the fizz. The compressor is actually acting as a sidechain to the kick drum. Then after that, I've put the bass mono on. So I've not turned it entirely to mono, but everything below 500 hertz is in mono. And then I've tucked in the stereo information. So I've decreased it by about 27%. And that's purely so that when I look at my stereo imaging, if I turn that off, you can see that it's just slightly leaking into the stereo field. And the correlation meter here is a little bit too close to 0 for my liking. So if I turn that back on, it's a little bit closer to 1. And you're not really getting any of the sound leaking into the stereo field. Because for something like this, it's quite a vibrant sort of sound. If I play that all in context, if I just mute it, you'll see exactly what that's doing to the track. Now it's on. So although it's kind of delicately sitting under the mix, it's adding a kind of sheen to the track. Now, if I don't have a ride like this in my track, I will usually put a layer of white noise underneath the track and heavily sidechain it. But I want it. I mean, for drum and bass, I like these sort of rides, especially for this sort of sound. It's kind of a key aesthetic in my eyes to write in this sort of sound, is having these sort of rides. So yeah, it's kind of acting as a kind of distorted ride stroke white noise type effect on the track, which is why I didn't want it leaking into the stereo field unknowingly. I wanted to have full control of it. So that's the ride. So let's go into here. Yeah, so this is I believe it's just a closed hat, and there's nothing there. So it's in mono again. And all I've done with this really is just applied a kind of a filter delay. So the delay in Ableton now, you do have the filter delay, but you also have the delay that has a filter on it. I tend to use this delay now because I find it's a lot better. It's a lot more simple, and you just get a quick result from it. So if I just turn that off, so my hi-hats, if we go into here, you'll see we have some syncopation with the velocity. I think that's quite important, especially if you've only got like one hat or one shaker. I don't like them to just go clang, 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 one after another. It just sounds really robotic and kind of regimented, which for some sounds might be okay, but for something like this, you just get that kind of humanized sort of sound, which you can't really notice, in context, but it does do something, so that's them there. The filter here is really high up, so 12.5K it's really delicately just sitting there, just adding something. And then an EQ after, which, it had a horrible spike in there, which I'm going to show you, because I think it's important that you really do take these spikes out, man. Like they can be really intrusive and really harsh and really sound horrible. So let's just solo that. So I'll just turn the EQ off. And you can hear that whistling. Turn it back on. And it's just a horrible whistling sound if you don't remove that. So I do that a lot, especially with shakers and percussive elements, because I don't want them to, they can really kind of get tiring on the ear as well for the listener. I don't have my percussion loud anyway in my shakers. I certainly don't have my hi-hats too loud. So, but if you do, then, you want to kind of look after your ears and make sure you take them frequencies out.
Sorry, mate, can I just jump in there?
Yeah, of course.
So, love that. And I think what people do commonly is start to boost those frequencies because it's high energy and they want that kind of loudness or that perceived loudness. When actually, like you said, by pushing those, I mean, when we listen to a lot of the demos that we get sent to Education and Bass, one of the most common problems is the high energy that's too loud and can be quite piercing to the ears. But actually, by taking out some of the noise, it enable you to boost it where it is louder, but it's actually a lot more pleasant on the ears.
Exactly.
And what I've noticed so far is you've done a lot of subtractive EQ. Is that a really kind of important part of your process?
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, I mostly, I mean, it's only if I'm doing heavy sound design that I might do some additive EQ. But when for, EQing for me is basically subtractive, when I'm sculpting sounds, especially for the mixing purpose of a track. If I'm sound designing, then definitely additive EQ might come into it. But subtractive for mixing and stuff, without a shadow of a doubt, that's definitely a thing for me. I actually opt to use that first and then draw for a compressor after, because I find that I can probably not go too hard with compression because I've done a good amount of subtractive EQing, which kind of balances the sound already. And then, the compressor will just kind of give it a bit more balance and more of a cohesive balance. Because if you visualize what a compressor does to an audio signal and what subtractive EQ does, although they might sound similar to the ear, when you export them to audio and you visualize them, a compressor does give more of a consistent and cohesive sort of waveform in like that process, but a bit of both, and it does really help. So
yeah, nice one, mate.
So we'll have a look at this contact thing. Now, this is a little trick that I'm actually going to record a little tutorial on for Education and Bass. I think it's quite a cool little thing that I've done for years, and I kind of do it second nature. So talking about energy, actually, a lot of people will boost the highs and stuff to create energy, and you don't really need to do that. You can create energy in a track in various other different ways, and this is one way that I choose to do it. So I'll just solo it and play it for you. So this is what actually gave me the thought of the name Centipede, because in my head I would imagine that when a centipede walks. That's what it could possibly sound like.
Scurrying along.
Yeah. And when I actually searched for the centipede sample, it was from a weird documentary from the 80s. And yeah, they were actually recording centipedes walking, and it kind of sounded a little bit like that. So I was quite pleased with my my thought there that that's how a centipede walked. So that's what kind of themed the track. But if I just play the drums soloed, if I mute that sound, them drums have just perished. They've just passed away, you know. And
it's quite a minimal rhythm section, isn't it? So that's just filled in.
Yeah. So it's and that there, to me, this here has acted as the glue that's brought all of the other elements together. Now, the way that I made that, so I've had to I've actually flattened and frozen this track. Prior to this, I'd done it when I was actually working on the track, because the processing was quite heavy, and because of the way that I sometimes edit the audio as well. So what I do is I will get an arpeggio. It could be any sort of arpeggio, and I'll tighten it right up, and I'll bring the transient right in. So this could have been some like acid techno, really in your face arpeggio, but I've tightened it right up and kind of made it into a kind of rhythm section, percussive sort of groove. So yeah, you know, I do that a lot in my tracks. It tends to work better with drum and bass because it's kind of faster and it adds to that element. Whereas if you do it in like a techno track or a dubstep track, it's a bit more noticeable, and it doesn't really have the same sort of effect for me anyway. So what I've done here is I've EQ'd it probably. There we go. There's a little bit of additive EQ.
Gone from one extreme to another, mate.
Well, it is kind of a form of sound design in this. So it's
well, there's no rules, right? It's all about learning the rules and breaking the rules, right?
Yeah, exactly. So again, I'm going to make this small because for some reason I have the EQ quite big when I'm working on it, which is kind of shot myself in the foot there because I'm having to make it small all the time. So let's just play that, and I'll just turn the EQ off, and you'll notice why. I'll turn off the erosion as well, because erosion's no doubt playing quite a big part in the sound of that. So mute it, solo it even. So I'll just turn the EQ off. And that is actually, to me, is bringing out almost like a kind of a hi-hat layer underneath. So there, it's bringing up quite a bit of resonance, which is just making it just sound a bit more percussive than like a processed, tightened up arpeggio.
And can I just point out, and this is quite important actually, it's a classic example of breaking rules, because unless you've got something else on there that I can't see, but you've got 4 dB of clip in there because you've boosted that, but doesn't matter, right? If it sounds all right, if it sounds all right, it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's just a classic example of, you know, you can certainly break rules, and if it works, it works. Yeah,
most definitely. Yeah, that's absolutely clipping to the high heavens. But
in the digital domain, that's not a big thing anyway now, like nowadays anyway. So
it's right. Well, the actual channel is minus 58, which is just so it's just the EQ just clipping a lot, but yeah, it sounds okay. So erosion is something that I use quite a bit. It's an Ableton native plugin, and it just adds a really nice gritty sort of sound. I use it in basses and stuff as well, but in this case, I've used it on this sort of processed arpeggio. It's not really, you can't really notice it too much here. I've gone with...
It's kind of smoothed it off a bit. Like it sounds...
Yeah, so like the way that I did it is, if you look here, so this is 4977 hertz. I've actually gone here 498 hertz. So I've kind of put the erosion only on that spike, just to kind of emphasize that a bit more. Because the thing is with erosion, it adds so much tone that it will dictate the key of the sound. So, you know, if I'd done that at 2K, and 2K is, I don't know, C1 sharp, let's say, for example, it will make that sound like it's in C sharp 1, which is kind of not what you kind of want. So I'm going to go with, so this is done by key. So this is E flat 8. And this is also there. So it's kind of sounding like it's in key, when actually the actual sound might not be in key. It just sounded okay, but boosting that frequency is giving the perception that it's actually in key with like the drums and stuff like that. That's quite important to me. I'll make sure that my drums and stuff and any sort of processing that I'm doing that involves frequencies, make sure, or you don't have to, but I myself always make sure that the frequency that I'm actually pushing is actually relative to the key that I'm working in. Because otherwise you can make something sound out of key, like just by pushing the wrong frequency, especially something as prominent as this sound. So yeah, that's why they sounds quite cohesive. And you'll hear as well that this actually changes pitch. Now I can't actually show you because actually I think I can actually. So let me just quickly have a look here. So clip. Yeah, so in Ableton, I don't know if you're aware, but if you open up here and click on transpose on a audio clip, you can transpose the audio clip whilst it's moving. So here, if we just go, what audio clip am I in here? Okay, so here. All right, so if we just pull it back, you'll hear that here it's in one note, and then it steps up. So solo it so you can hear it properly. And it's just adding like different sort of energy, going in and out of breaks and drops, and it's very subtle. So if you hear it in context. So it's just kind of stepped up the energy a little bit in regards to tone. Again, it took me a little while to just find the the right note, because when you're doing stuff like that, it needs to be in the right note. The last thing you want to do is start automating the the pitch of a sound, and it just sounds a bit strange. It's because it's probably in the wrong note. So just experiment with that. That's only gone up by 2 semitones, which will effectively take it to F, which is in the E flat minor scale. So that's fine. And it sounded okay, which was the main thing to me. So that is the drums. I'll just have a look at the drum bus, or the drum group rather. It's I've got some tape saturation on there. I use this by Slate Digital. And basically it just really just glues the drums together. And it's given me, I believe, a perceived loudness of about 1 dB as well. Or possibly 2 dB. And all I've done is just kind of messed with the settings here a little bit and just tweaked them until I was kind of happy. But if I just play them and turn this on and off, we kind of hear. We'll solo it. It just kind of just warms them up slightly and just shaves off some of that high end still. Now I do saturate everything, and it kind of goes against me sometimes because I end up with quite a dull mix, which is again brings me to reinforcing the importance of cross-referencing when it comes to the mixing stage. Especially, I open up a bunch of tracks by artists and music that I admire and I like the mix of, and I'll listen and I always think, wow, my tune sounds so dull, because I've actually just sucked the life out of the top end due to the saturation, which is fine, providing you know how to reintroduce that. So I will be showing you what I used to do that. But yeah, the saturation is nice. I use the tape saturation on my drums, and then tube saturation on other stuff, because it just seems to work for me.
Before you move on from drums, there was a question that I'd like to in the chat there. From 40 miles west. Easy, Danny.
Oh.
Now I know you kind of know this, but what is your kind of your thought process on the workflow? So what is the thinking or benefit for Nurve using multiple drum racks for each drum sample rather than just using one drum rack for the whole song? Because as you know, you can process each drum hit independently in a drum rack. Yeah. So what is your kind of reason for that choice?
Do you know what it is for me? I think it's because I've worked in audio for so many years. I think I kind of because I get so deep in automation and I get quite technical with things and I've got automation lanes everywhere. If I don't separate things, I'm going to end up changing the wrong thing or changing something. So if I have them in independent channels, I know that if I make a mistake on that kick drum, it's not going to affect anything else or something. So for me, it's more just being cautious because if I've got all my drums in one drum rack, I might just be having a day where I'm just on my phone, I'm doing something, I've done something, and I'm like, oh, why does that snare sound weird all of a sudden?
Yeah, and it's just seeing it, isn't it, in front of you? Because
exactly.
I used to work with, God rest his soul, man, Tango, R.I.P. Tango, and when he would use Contact, where he would just route it so you could have one instance of Contact and just have multiple sounds and control, like a traditional sampler. Routed through the mixer and stuff. And he asked me why I would have multiple instances of Contact. And my answer is quite similar. It's just to have that in front of me. And my CPU's happy. It's not like my CPU's struggling.
Exactly.
So just to have that, I just think, and plus maybe it's a bit old school, right?
I think it is a bit of an old school thing, but I think it's more for my own headspace. It just makes more sense to me. It just resonates with me a lot more. There's no difference in technicality. It doesn't sound better this way or that way. I don't do it for that reason. It is purely just for workflow and what feels comfortable to me.
Yeah, nice one for the question. Again, any other questions, please do drop them in the comments. Our Allegria, it'd do my head in having to open up the rack every time you want to do these things. I mean, it's just down to preference and workflow,
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, it's fine. All good. Sweet. So we can have a look at we've got the effects next in this little group here. So I've got a TS group here. I'll explain a bit more about that. But that's just an overall group that I used to do something with, but you'll find groups within groups here. So in Contact, so this was a sound that started in Contact. I since flattened and froze it into audio. I'll solo it and play it.
It's a bit scary, mate.
Yeah, it actually started out as a bongo. It's plus 48 semitones. So let me bring that back to 0 and I think you'll see what I mean. Well,
still not bongo, bruv.
It's a very hurt bongo, destroyed bongo. If I turn off, you
certainly
might
not one of Nomine's bongos, that's for sure.
Let's not pass the nominee test, man. That bongo. Let's just go back to 0. Yeah,
is that reversed?
It is, yeah. So it started out as a bongo in Contact. It was actually after I told you about them bongos and stuff in Contact. That new kind of kit that they put in there, and I was tinkering about with it. That was when they were bongos when this was a techno track, and now it just become this. So basically, I just went crazy on it, done a lot of processing. I probably can tell you exactly what I did.
Someone in the chat said OMFG Music says the bongo falling down the Grand Canyon.
That is it.
That's a great description.
Save the bongo. We'll have to send out.
I love it though, Matt. It's a nice dark sound. I actually like it pitched down as well.
Yeah, it's nice. It's it's definitely a cool sound. It's so transient here. Pulled the attack right down, just to make it just take that transient off the front. Weren't needed. Trash 2 is no doubt playing a big part. So we'll just turn Trash 2 off. Yeah, it doesn't exist without Trash 2. Trash 2 is it's great, but it's really loud and really in your face. So I find that every time I use Trash 2, if I turn it off, the sound just disappears. So now the cool thing about it is I use a plugin called Portal by a company called Output, which is it's great. It really is a cool plugin. So what I did was it's
granular, right? Granular synthesis.
Yeah.
Effect, yeah.
So that's what's giving it that pitch. So if I play it now, you can see it's kind of pitching off. It's transposing. So if I turn it off, you know, so this is acting and playing a big part in that sound. And again, I just stumbled across it by accident. I opened up a preset. I find that Portal works really well if you find a preset that you kind of like, and then just strip it back and dissect it, and you get to all the little parameters and stuff in here, and you can kind of get a bit more control over it, because it's quite an animated plugin, and the presets are really in your face. But yeah, that really plays a big part in that sound. I think the sound wouldn't be all that cool if it didn't have that sort of transposing sort of delay on the end. Then I've saturated it. So just taken off that, you hear that kind of screaming off the end there, which is quite piercing. So the saturation has kind of dulled that down. And then a reverb on the end. Again, it's the Slate Digital reverb. Kind of brings it to life quite a bit. Puts it in a nice space. So that's that sound. And in context, it's actually one of the first sounds I made for this track. And it's one of the few surviving sounds that stayed with me through this track's journey. And it just kind of mutated and changed. And then here is a shorter version of it, which is pitched down.
Love that.
It's just so that I don't mind sounds repeating and stuff, but not one after another all the time, especially quite noticeable sounds like this. So that's for that drop, and then that for that drop.
That
and
pitch down one's wicked. I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's got a nice
distorted. Mate, I've got an idea for a whole track just with that sound.
Timbre. I'll send it to you, man. I'll export it and send it to you. So yeah, that's that sound there. Reactor 6, I use something in Reactor. You know, that's the cool thing. When I'm sound designing and making little sounds for tracks, I just I love using plugins that I don't usually use and stuff. I do use Reactor a bit more than some, but yeah, this is I can't remember what this is, but yeah, it's just some really dry, distorted sound.
What's cool though, you've obviously used similar process. So there's a certain color and timbre of all the sound effects. The way you've obviously processed them in this session, they've got a similar vibe to them.
They have, yeah, you're right, and I believe that's. I
mean, Trash again is obviously playing a big part in that.
I think it's Trash. Yeah, I'd say it wouldn't surprise me if I open up Trash.
Same preset.
Because the thing is with Trash that I find is that in your face that. You can sometimes just be put off by it because it's just too much. But once I find a nice sort of preset that I've created in Trash, I will sometimes use it. Now, I'm probably going to guess, and I'll check this here. So amp drainer, and I've probably copied and pasted that.
For the viewers as well, if you are after a good distortion that's got copious amounts of options and control, Trash is amazing.
Yeah, it actually works as a saturator as well, multi-band dynamics. It's got a lot. It's got filters and all sorts in there. It is really, really good, but as a distortion unit is unforgiving. You know, it's brutal. So yeah, you know, I didn't copy that, but what I did is I think Trash has got such a tone and a coloration to it that, you know, if we play both them sounds together.
Yeah, similar vibes.
They have. It's just got that really, really heavy distorted sound, which is what's probably done that. But so yeah, you know, with this sound here, compressor where it's sidechain to the kick, because the delay, if we just listen to the delay comes off. So it's just not too intrusive there. It's got a saturator again, and then the delay just, you know, coming off the end. And that's pretty much it for that sound there for the effects. So the bass.
The balls.
Hey?
The balls.
The balls of the tune. Multiple serums, which is why my CPU is crying. Excuse me if you can hear my dog barking. The door's just gone.
See, but, even Milo heard that, man, and started getting upset.
Milo heard he knew that Serum was coming. But yeah, so I'll just play this. This is actually quite a chilled and stripped back bass for me. But I was really pleased with the way I kind of got the results here with these little parts here. So I'll just play it quickly. It's just really teched out, and just this is exactly why you can't have a lot of percussion when you've got a bass like that, because you can hear so much fizz and so much energy in the high end of the frequency spectrum on that bass that there's no room for percussion. You know, trying to just fudge it in there because there should be some hi-hats, there's no point. So yeah, I'll just talk through that bass. So Serum, it's a patch created in Serum. I've got some content on Serum actually over on the website, some advanced Serum stuff, which kind of lifts the lid on the way I use Serum. But this again is quite a stripped back and sort of chilled sort of bass for me. It's more of a sub bass as opposed to like a gnarly sort of synthetic bass in that sense. Now the main kind of contributor to why that sounds like that would be the OTT in Ableton, which is actually, if you're not familiar with it, which you probably are because it's quite widely spoken of, it's a multi-band dynamic processor, but OTT is just like basically that. It's just not. It's just a really gnarly like distortion, multi-band distortion unit, really. So you can find that in the multi-band dynamics. If you don't use Ableton, X for Records actually created their own version of it, which is called OTT, and you can get that on their website. And I think if you own Serum, you can actually get that for free. If not, it's not that expensive anyway. But yeah, anyway, this is the OTT. If I turn it off and then turn it on.
Wow.
Yeah, it really brings it to life. And you can see what I've done here. I've really exaggerated the low end, and the mids are kind of okay, and the tops is a reasonable place. Because believe you me, if you push that tops, I'll be taking my headphones off because it's really out there. So be mindful when you do use it, because it is quite exaggerated and could be a little bit naughty. The other thing I've done on here, the bass mono. Now I've monoed everything below 150 hertz and just left the width as it is. I think is if we have a look at the bass is in mono anyway. So
is that your sub oscillator on the Serum there? Is the sub oscillator doing that low?
Nah, we can have a look at it quickly. It's
have you got like a sine wave?
So I believe there's a couple of it's got two different versions of the same wavetable, and the wavetable positions are placed differently. It's got the same unison amount, one slightly detuned less than the other. It does have the sub oscillator on
-3 octaves.
Like, on a triangle sort of setting. So yeah, the sub oscillator is playing a part in the weight. If we play that, which
not a ton,
you can't really.
Not a ton of weight. It's doing something.
Well, no, I think it's because the OTT is
separated out.
Yeah, it's kind of you can't really notice the difference in that sub. So if we turn off the OTT, let's say, if I turn that sub off, so it still only has a subtle sort of.
It's really, I can hear it. It's really low, but it's there. It definitely would bring a weight for sure.
And then it's got the filter here on the band reject. That is no doubt being controlled by LFO2. It's just a slight movement, just to give it a little bit of kind of movement, basically, just so that it's not just flat and punchy. I have a look at the effects. I've got another filter here, distorted comb filter as well, which is more than likely automated by nothing. I thought it was automated by something, but it's not. But it's just set on here, and yeah, that's the bass really, the main bass.
What have you done?
So
Sorry, can I look at the global on the width there? Because I find Serum can be, if you don't control the width, it can be an absolute nightmare. It's on the global tab there at the top.
Yeah.
Have you still
No,
at what have you done to control the width there? Because it can be a nightmare to control Serum, can't it? Sometimes.
Yeah. So what I've done is I've put it in mono.
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
here. Yeah, and that kind of helps it. I think another thing that I've done though is here. So if we look at this random here and the detune as well, it all kind of contributes to it kind of staying within, in like a more of a mono sort of field, than spreading it into the stereo field. So
yeah, just a quick one to the viewers. If you do use Serum, be very mindful of when you fold your mix down to mono, how terrible it can sound if you're not being considerate of the mono compatibility. Serum, I've spent hours creating what I think's the most amazing patch, flicked my interface into mono, and it just sounds like absolute rubbish. And you can't fix it. If you've built it like that and you try and then go in and narrow things, it just doesn't work. That's
why, like, if I play, if I just play that, can you hear that now? It's starting to open up, and that's where you get the random phase, and that's what that is. So it just throws it around. So I tuck this in. But yeah, just to reinforce what Andrew said, is the Serum. It can really fool you into thinking you've just made the patch of your life, and then fold it to mono, and you'll be like, wow.
And again, mono's important, everybody. It's really important, especially if you want your stuff to sound good in a club. It's really important.
I'm very conscious of that, because Serum, out of all the synths that I use, can really fool you, and you just need to be a bit mindful. It's absolutely great, in that high end part for the animation on the bass, but the low end, you need to be slightly mindful, because it will leave you feeling very sad that your bass is not what you thought. So I just want to solo these other two parts here, because I actually think these parts here are really, really important parts to this bass. So if I just unsolo these, just play the bass, the main bass on its own, it's okay, but it's a little bit boring. So if you bring these in, and these are actually duplicates of this bass and just slightly tweaked differently. So I'll just go in here. Yeah, so exactly the same bass, just slightly tweaked. The filters changed, and I could tell you what I did, but it's just a case of experimenting. This one here plays a really. There's this one here. We soloed that on its own. It's kind of a little techie sort of stab, which, if you listen to it bounce off the drums, and if we remove that, we'll just solo it. If we remove it,
it dies.
And it's a totally different tune. Just that one bass. Now, brilliant. Some might prefer it like that, some might not, but it's just that little flick off the kick drum. It can lead you to think that there's a lot more that's gone into that, but it's just catching that right sort of modulation, let's say, on that bass that's kind of caused that. Again, I could try that 100 times in a day and just get it wrong. In this case, I got it right. It's as simple as that, really. I could try that again in different tunes and won't be able to do it. But I got it right in this one, thankfully, because without that in there, it'd be a very different tune. That's just like being frequency modulated to the high heavens, which is, so that's got the frequency has been modulated from the sub oscillator onto the wavetable. So let me just play that quickly. So I'll just move that up. And
some alien business.
Yeah, and it's just really animated and over the top. Again, if you play with the octave or the shape of the sub oscillator, so change it, go up one, go down a couple, you know, and you've got a nice different variety. Change it to square. Yeah, so you could just kind of play around with it. And that's, you know, it's just something that I kind of experiment with, that I find quite interesting and fun to mess with. And that's just a little edit fill here. There's nothing, you know, it's not a focal point. It's very sparsely used in the track. It's only used 4 times in the entire track. And it's covered with other stuff that you won't even hear anyway, but it adds something to it. I like my transition edits, something that I kind of spend probably more time than the rest of the tune on sometimes.
Do you know what I love about this track?
Yeah.
And it's quite important, actually. I think you'll probably agree that everything in solo doesn't sound that great, but in context together, it creates an amazing picture. And that's important, because people often, and this is something that I was talking about yesterday in the Q&A when we're talking about EQing sounds. You can spend an hour EQing a sound in solo and making it sound what you think is the best, and then you put it in context and you've got to redo it again because it's not in context. What you've got there is a bunch of almost seemingly random sounds that you might hear on their own and think, what the hell is that? A bongo running, falling down a Grand Canyon. But actually, in context, it's just an amazing collage that creates a big picture, and that's really important, because people often think that those individual parts need to be the money, when it's not. It's all about the combination of the sounds.
You know, I'm so glad that you said that and picked up on that. You know, like, you actually gave me goosebumps, because that's how I hear things. I hear things and I think, you know what, that's just sounds terrible. Like, I couldn't have some of them sounds on their own. Like, I wouldn't, but they weren't designed for that, and they are made in context as well. So I'll make some of them. The more weird and the more horrible a sound kind of sounds, I think, you know what, there's something there, and then I'll layer it with something else and something else, and next minute it just works. And it's true. Like, I couldn't imagine, like, you know, what is the perfect sound in your track, but the track sounds perfect with imperfect sounds. It's quite crazy, really. Yeah. But so I've got this other one here. What is this? Yeah, again, it's just another instance of Serum. It's just doing its thing. I think the effects kind of take away a lot of the focus on them sort of synth sounds. But, you know, if we remove them layers, or it's lost something. So yeah, it's all about them little intricate layers. It works quite well. So just quickly, just into that Serum again, it's the same thing. I usually find that the way that I like sort of make my basses, and when I've got an arrangement or a group of basses, I will always have one main bass, and then the other basses are kind of duplicates of the first bass, and they're just kind of changed and tweaked, because I also find that gives the bass a sense of cohesiveness as well. They've got a similar sort of timbre, because they're all exactly the same wavetable, but they're all slightly tweaked and moved around differently, different wavetable positions or a different filter, but you've still got that same sort of timbre that's kind of there gluing it all together. So if we hear them again all together, it just works in all its imperfections and stuff, but it just does its thing. Whereas if I was to use like a bass from Phase Plant, maybe a bass from Massive, yes, it would probably work, cool, but it maybe not as well, you know, in my eyes, that it would if it was just one bass kind of mutated differently across different channels. And that's it for the bass. You know, it's quite stripped back. There's a lot that's gone into it to kind of almost create that minimal sort of sound.
It's just one big call and response, isn't it? Everything's flicking off of each other and bouncing off of each other.
Every single thing in my tracks are all call and responses. I remember Kev used to say that to me back in the day. Like even when I was making grime, he was like, everything, even to your drum patterns are calls and response, everything. And yeah, it is. Everything's talking to one another, and it's quite quick and glitchy and stuff. I love that sort of stuff. But I think a lot of music is. I just think it's some people do it subconsciously. You know, it's just how it is. But I think when you really tap into that, you really feel it, and you can really work on it. It's cool.
Yeah, if you can exaggerate, like what you've done there, you've totally just honed in on call and response and exaggerated it to create something, different.
Yeah, exactly. So this here, just solo that. Okay, so this is one of the tracks that I froze because not a great deal went into it. I used a synth called Ana 2. I don't know if you're familiar. Ana is short for analog. It's not analog. It's a soft synth created by Slate Digital. And it's based around it being an analog synth. And to be honest, they've done really well with it. It's a great synth. I used the Omnisphere 2 for many years, and this has actually replaced the Omnisphere 2 for me. Sorry, Spectrasonics, but it has. And yeah, it's just an amazing synth. So obviously this is not really showing it off in any sort of way. This is just a kind of a little sort of like techie sort of stab. Just in the intro. It's just a layer. Nothing too much has gone into it. So let's have a look here. I think the same here as well. Yeah, it's just a little effect sound that I kind of like. I usually put things like this throughout the drop, just to kind of, I don't know, just to fill a bit of a void while the track's sort of rolling out. So if I just play that in context. You can hear that there. That's been sidechained to the kick drum as well, so it's not too intrusive. But I've actually flattened and frozen that, so the side chaining, because now you can do that in Ableton. If I just open this up, you can see here where the side chaining is actually happening, and it's just so that sound wasn't too intrusive. Like, so in the intro, it's not, 'cause there's no kicks, but here it is, and yeah, I find that when I've got like quite drawn out effects or swooshes or any sort of ambience that's going throughout the drop, I always do sidechain it to a drum, mostly the kick or the snare, just so that it's not too intrusive. And it also adds it kind of a bit of rhythm as well, and gives that sort of sound a little bit of sort of rhythm to bounce off the drums and stuff like that. So
again,
really
mate,
dry.
like, I'm not being funny, that's a shit sound.
It really is.
It's a shit sound, but if you made a sample pack out of this, I'd think you'd lost the plot, mate. But it's an absolutely amazing track, and it's just a classic example of that sort of thing, man. That
if we play it in context, it really does add something to that.
Yeah, and then the way it kind of leads in, and it's got other bits.
Yeah, it's all really abrupt. Like if I mute that. It's dead. It's got no life, but we bring it in. And it just adds to the bigger picture. So yeah, I 100% agree. It's a pretty crap sound. And I remember even when I made it, I was like, that's really shit, man. Like, and I took the reverb off it. But it just works in there, and if I remove it, it's lost something, so
I get that all the time, man. Like, I'll forget and I'll just solo my sounds towards the end, and I'm like, what was I thinking? What is that? But actually, it needs it. It doesn't work without it.
I hear that. So I've got these arpeggios here. I love an arpeggio in this sort of track. So the intro arpeggio, I actually flattened it and froze it because it's basically a copy of the main arpeggio, but for the intro. Again, I could have, kind of going back to the whole drum group thing earlier, where the drum rack, where I could have had all the drums in one and done stuff there. And similar here as well, I could have actually had the same arpeggio in the intro and just automated it differently, but one wrong move and I bodge up the arpeggio on the drop, and I was like, oh no, and it starts to kind of give me a bit of a headache. So I just duplicated it and basically just, if I just solo it, just, it's really dry. It just works in context. But the arpeggio in the main drop is where, as you can see here, I went quite to town on the automation. And a lot of that is just freestyled. As the track's playing, I'll just change the parameters. And if I like it, then I'll stick with it. If I don't, I'll change it and just keep going over it. It could take some time, but it's a very unique sort of automation lanes, and I don't think that it's the same in any one place, which is kind of what I wanted. So if I just solo that, we'll open it up quickly. I'll show you Anna 2 real quick. It might take a second to load the Slate Digital stuff. Oh no, it's fine. So this is Anna 2. You can have it in the white skin or the black skin. I'm not a salesman for Slate Digital by any means, but I just thought I'd let you know that. And it's great. It's basically kind of emulated on analog hardware synths, and it's really, really good. It's got a nice thick sound about it, especially for these acidy type of sounds. So I have used one of their acid sounds, and this is the arp in the drop. And as you'll see, it will just start to mutate. And it opens up. So if we just listen to it here. And it just basically mutates. So what I've done is I've got the beat value of the arpeggio even, the LFO rate and the LFO depth. And the way that I come to want to automate these within the lane is I was just playing with the synth and just tweaking the parameters, and I thought, oh, that sounds cool. It'd be great if I can automate them. And then I just opened them up and just began to automate them. And then I come with that. I actually think that this actually, without this, the track would have just been dead. And it took me a little while to think about it. And I remember I was laying in my bed and I was thinking, oh, I need to put some ARP in there or something. I remember going through the Slate Digital synth and thinking it's got some cool stuff in there. I literally just ran downstairs there and then and just started doing it, because I thought, if I don't get this down onto the door right now, I'm scared I'm going to forget. I rarely do, but there's always that thing where you think, if I don't do it right now, I'm going to forget, which you won't, because, but it needed to be done there and then. So I spent about an hour and a half kind of just doing all this. But this is a really strong part of the track. The ARP kind of gives it a lot of character, a lot of movement. It kind of brings it to life, and really kind of again, this is, to me, is a key aesthetic sort of sound to the sound that I'm trying to make of drum and bass. I think that there is an important part of it. So we'll move on to this here. This has just been flattened down to audio, because I think I just processed it so heavily. As you can see, it's absolutely destroyed the waveform, clipping and all sorts. But yeah, I flattened it because it had so much going on that it needed to alleviate some of the CPU pressure. And it's just some ambience, for the intro. Yeah, so it's just a really, I think it was just a quite a nice pad of ambience, and I just totally just destroyed it, just distorted it with Trash 2, no doubt, and some processes and stuff. So one of the theme for this track, Centipede. So, sometimes I've heard a couple of people say they don't really like them themed sort of tracks. They think it's a bit cheesy and stuff sometimes, if a track's got the name of the track and then you've got the actual word of the name of the track in the track. But this is actually a little bit different. So here we have Centipede Vox. So this is like 6 different instances of a vocal sample that I took off YouTube, I think, and it was some some mad early 90s, late 80s documentary or something that had been uploaded. It was a guy recording centipedes walking as a scientific experiment. So that's where I took his vocals and I just went to town on it. So this first one here, which is actually him talking and automated. If we look here, You see the pitch here transposed. So it actually starts at like 0 or plus 48 and goes right down to 0. So it actually scales across 4 octaves throughout this 16 bar period. And that's just there as like a little layer. You know, just to give it that sort of techie, sort of weird, alien-y sort of type sound. So what's gone into that is quite a few things here. So Pro Q3, obviously the EQing. This was probably the EQ curve that was off the main vocal, because again, they're all duplicates. So what I'll do is I'll EQ the main vocal sample, let's say, or the sample. I'll EQ the horrible parts, or what I think are horrible parts, out of it, and then anything that I duplicate from there onwards should be fine. If I want to remove other stuff after processing, that's something that I'll need to do. But I find if I EQ it to start things off, then everything I duplicate from there should be fine. So it's got the Eventide harmonizer, which is something that, yeah, man, is in that what was used for the Terminator breaks. Well, not this one, but the hardware version, was it? Is it?
Yeah, Goldie like used a harmonizer to run those Terminator, those really flanged breaks through back in the day.
Yeah, so I try to use the harmonizer as much as possible. It's got a real kind of like analog kind of tone to it as well. Whenever you put something through this, or I suppose any of the Eventide plugins, you get this kind of
like you literally just turn the plugin on without it doing anything, and it just gives it that saturation.
Yeah,
you know, it's really nice.
Exactly. Now, you know, the effect that you might have, might have to change it, but the actual sound, it just makes everything sound better instantly. And then obviously you need to tweak it and stuff and whatnot. But let's just play that. So that's it without. It just brings it to life, you know, which is really cool. An EQ after that as well, some mid to side EQing. So what I've done is I've scooped everything out. Again, this is all for the stereo imaging. I didn't want anything in the lower part of the frequency spectrum to go into stereo field. I usually give a 2 or 3 dB boost on the mono or the mid once I've scooped out from the side, because regardless whether you like it or not, you are taking out low end from your sound, whether it be the side or whatever. So if I reintroduce some of it via the mid, then it kind of just balances it, and it's not sounding too much different. I find that this kind of works. It could probably come up a little bit more, but I felt that just reintroducing nearly 3 dB there was okay. But I do that a lot with mid to side EQ. Again, this is the Ozone Imager, just to make sure that it was all in check.
Is that still free?
It certainly is, yeah. You get that on the Isotope website. I think they've actually brought out the second one, Imager 2, which is also free.
Go get it, people. If you haven't got an Imager, it's a great free plugin, and just keep an eye. Anything that's outside of that pizza slice in the middle, that's the shit that's going to be disappearing when it's in mono.
Exactly.
So keep an eye on that, man.
Exactly. It also, you can actually apply stereo to it as well. So although it's a stereo monitoring unit, but you can also stereoize sounds in it, as it says here and stuff, and apply width. Again, be kind of mindful with that, because you know you could get carried away with that stuff quite easily, because everything sounds great when it's nice and wide, but flatten it to mono and it just is gone, you know. So I put the tuner on here because I can't actually remember why I did that. I think
trying to make sure it's still in key.
I think it was, yeah, but it's C isn't. Oh yeah, it's in C sharp, which is actually in the scale of E flat minor. So that's what it was. I wanted to just make sure that it was kind of in the scale.
Yeah.
I wasn't ever going to get it in key because it transposes 4 octaves as it travels. But yeah, that's that there. So then we got the solid bus compressor, because it's got quite a lot of effects and it's scaling through 4 octaves. I put a compressor on there because you're you know, when you're traveling through different notes or semitones, you're effectively traveling through different frequencies, and some frequencies might be louder than others. So if you put a compressor on, you can keep them kind of balanced and you don't get no big spikes and stuff like that, which is something, if you're doing a lot of filtering with basses as well, as something to bear in mind. If I have a lot of a lot of filter movement, I'll always put a compressor on. If I just go back to the ARP quickly, because that was one place where I didn't put a compressor on, which I thought I would have. It must not have needed it, but that's the type of thing, you see, with all this automation here, this would be the type of thing that if it was really over the top, especially if you're automating resonance, within a synth, then you might want to take a look at possibly putting a compressor at the end of the chain just to make sure it doesn't poke out too much. But yeah, so keep having a look here. So,
or if you're super anal like me, you can automate the volume.
Exactly that. Yeah, for sure.
That's
exactly the same thing, and I think,
it takes a bit longer, but it just means you don't use the compressor.
Exactly how you want to approach it. Yeah, for sure. You've got exact control then, and but either way works fine.
Spider's web that's been in my studio been bugging me for the longest time. Sorry, I just had to bash that. Before we move on, mate, I'd like to give it a 5-minute kind of thing that we have to start to wrap up in about 5-6 minutes, but we will give 5 minutes for questions after that. So if anyone that's watching right now, if you've got any questions, please do drop them in the comments of the stream, and please remember that there's no such thing as a stupid question. There's been some quite advanced content here, and we don't expect you to know all about it, and literally whether you're a beginner, intermediate or advanced, please do feel free to drop a question, and if anyone laughs, we will bar them for life from life. So just please feel free to drop a question in the comments, and let us know where you're tuned in from as well. Big shout to the Tampa crew. I see ya.
You got. Yeah, so I'll quickly just breeze through these last little bits. So here is, that is a centipede walking, apparently. Let's take the phaser off. That is a centipede walking. That's what the guy's experiment was about. So I thought that is not been flattened or nothing. That is as dry as it come off YouTube. It's got some EQ, and again, it's going to have a complete different EQ curve, but that's it. And I just put a phaser on it, and that is just literally sitting underneath. And it's there, it's doing something, and I just thought, it'd be rude not to involve it. What do we have here? So this is a centipede vocal sample. Centipede. Sounds like a posh lady saying centipede. It's not. It's actually this guy here. Centipede. And it's pitched up. And this has been flattened and frozen. I probably did this during the track, and it was purely because it was just trying to free up some CPU and stuff. But this had the Eventide harmonizer on it as well, and that's what gives it that chorus, where you've got like kind of different versions of it just sitting underneath. Pitch wise, I think I pitched it down slightly. That would be on the frozen one, so that would be at 0 now. And this here is just a copy of that, just automated and kind of messed around with. This here, I believe. Yeah. So this is in E flat. You probably hear my dog again now, going through it. And it just kind of travels and just it's got some process. It's got the harmonizer on it again. Again, it's stereo field. Make sure that's all good. Same with the mid to side EQ. And that's just basically just put in there just to give it a bit of character. Again, just to go with the whole theme and just make it a bit sci-fi and stuff like that. And there's some other parts to that too here. It's just another weird sort of version of that sound. And I've just put it in there. It was acting like a type sort of vibe going on in there if you're into your trap, hip-hoppy beats, sort of that mentality approach to it. Last thing I'll touch on here, the electricity.
The Force is Electric. Do you remember that track, The Force is Electric, that old hardcore drum and bass? I think it was Ed Rush, wasn't it, back in the day?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Reminds me of that.
So it kind of works off the centipede vocal. It was there to kind of bounce off that. So, and I'll be completely honest, I dragged it in and left it. That's it. It's got no EQ, no nothing whatsoever. That is it. Exactly how it come in. And it just worked. You know, it comes in here a bit more. And that is it. I didn't even bother EQing it. I'm that much of a rebel. I thought you can stay like that. Phase plant. I use phase plant. If you're familiar with phase plant, this is just a one shot, and I think it's just twice in the entire track, and it's just an edit. Topped with a little vocal sample, reversed weird vocal sample. Crazy. Just another crap sound.
Another crap sound that contributes to an amazing track.
This is again, it's just another little sort of one-shot type sound, just poking in and out of the little edits. That's it. If you haven't used phase plant, it's a great synth. Again, it's just really, really good for sound designing. I'm not sure what this is.
Oh, some nice
yeah, it's just a
business.
Yeah, it's just a pad.
Love that pad.
Yeah. And it was just put in there underneath just to give it a little bit. Just lightly underneath, just to kind of fill the void that I felt that it had at the time. It just needed a little bit of atmospheric in there. And this last bit here, just an absolutely unbelievable sound. But in context, it starts to creep in, and it just works. I do like a lot of my stuff really dry, as you probably hear. It adds to the whole sort of snappy, sort of techie thing. If I was to put reverb and stuff on there first, I struggle with reverbs anyway. I find that I struggle with the space and room that it puts things in sometimes, and so I just swerve it. But I do use it.
I think everything sounds closer without it as well, right? If you want the sound to sound closer in the mix, you can mess with pre-delay and stuff, but it does bring it forward in the mix, which, you know, if that's a desire.
It does, yeah. You know. I kind of tend to use reverbs more on like, I don't know, like a transition where I'll open it up really, really loud, and, you know, then kind of just tuck it back in. But actually on the sounds, I don't really apply it that much, because I just prefer what it does when it's just dry, really. I don't know if we've got time to have a look at the mastering chain, or do you want to?
We have, because actually one of the questions from Eric Townsend was, can you explain your mastering process a bit?
Sweet.
And then
sure.
it's just because we actually have a meeting at 2:45.
Oh yeah, we do actually, don't we? Yep.
Otherwise we would happily stay here, and it's a meeting that we can't change.
Oh yeah, we can't really change. No, that's very true. Cool. Okay, so I'll just quickly whiz through this. So first thing in my mastering chain is this little unit, which is a free unit. I don't know if it's still free now. And basically, safe bass, everything below 200 hertz in mono. Stereo width, I increase it by 40%. That's on the entire track. But everything above 200 hertz. Some might frown on it, some might not. But I like that it kind of gives the whole track that width, because a lot of the track and is quite contained within mono and not too wide in the stereo field, so I can afford to push it a bit more here on the mastering chain. Then I have an EQ where I completely brick wall everything from 20 hertz and below, and brick wall everything from 19.5K and above. Purely because the 20 hertz there is, you can't really hear it, but it could be not the greatest of frequencies. And if I'm not mistaken, we can't really hear too much above 19.5K. Is that right, Andrew?
If you're lucky, man. I mean, because of because of our age, and I know one of the questions earlier on was how old are you, Nurve? But we won't necessarily have to go there, because I'm older.
You can see my grey beard, innit? That's why.
I'm older than you, mate. But anyway, I'm definitely getting towards the older side of things. But I think the older you get, I think I'd be lucky if I could hear above 7. I mean, I can, don't get me wrong, but I think the older you are, the less sensitive you are from 17k and above. But yeah, I think unless we're a bat, we can't hear too much. But then saying that, there are some plugins that allow you to boost like 25k's and stuff. And
the Pro Q3 goes up to 30k.
Yeah, so there is
30k.
You can, there is something you can sense or you can feel for sure.
So basically, the older I get, so if you come and see this same tutorial in 20 years, this brick wall will be down here somewhere because I'll be like,
and your hi-hats will be like 45 dB too loud.
With the thinnest mix, it'll just be just a high pass track.
Just be a looped hi-hat for 6 minutes.
So I've got a compressor here set on, this is a preset, it's called the Golden Transparency preset on the Pro C2.
What a name.
That's after the first EQ. Hey?
What a name for a preset.
Yeah, I know, Golden Transparency. I thought it'd be rude not to use it. Then after the compressor, I'll open up another EQ, and that's where I kind of do the EQ out the stereo information. So up to, I don't do every track the same. I do it by ear, and I think, you know what, that it was fine just here with a little nudge just on 5k upwards of just 1 dB, just so the stereo feels just slightly louder in the high end, but ever so slightly, not too much. Then I've got a saturator here, a tube saturator, which is on a Mix Bus Tube Enhancer preset that I've obviously tweaked to myself slightly, brought in some of the highs there because it's nice, it warms up the mix, but then immediately after, I have to open up this, which is by Slate Digital, it's called Revival. And I've actually had to apply 12 dB of shimmer because if I just, shimmer, if I play the track without it, and then turn it on, you can't notice it too much, but believe you me, the track's very dull without this. So because I saturate everything, it makes it quite dull. This here is how I reintroduce the high end to give it a bit more clarity, and I do that with the shimmer here. You can also apply some thickness here as well. This has been compared loosely to the Pultec, slightly in the same similar sort of way it works, apart from you don't have the flexibility to actually set what frequencies it's actually pushing or between what frequencies, but it's really nice. It does the job for me. Then I've got my limiter, which I've had to tone down quite a lot. That's sitting on plus 13. This was actually on plus 29, and it was absolutely slammed with about 14 dB gain reduction. But on the kick and snare, I kind of specifically do that to just so it kind of crunches them down. And yeah, I tread a thin line, but I seem to get it right on this track. And yeah, it's loud. It's got snap, nothing's compromised, but yeah, it's extremely heavily abused on this sort of side of it. I think it's hitting about -8 LUFS, which is okay. Any more, and it would just sound crap. So that's as far as I could push it. The stereo imager, which is, just to make sure the actual track's sitting nice in the stereo field, which we'll have a little look at. Channel. There we go. So that's where my track's sitting. Overall, man, that will sound pretty much the same on the system as it would here and stuff. Obviously, some of the effects will spill into the stereo field, but only slightly. And then we've got the EQ spectrum here on the end. And that's pretty much my own mastering chain that I use on my tracks. It's not always the same. I use the same units, but I tweak stuff differently. And that's that. One last little thing, just quickly touch on this track spacer group. So I basically sidechain everything, this part of the track, with a unit called track spacer. Everything that you heard there is sidechained 50% to my kick and my snare. And here you can dictate the frequencies. So it's from 45 hertz, which is where the kick starts, to 793 hertz, which is where the highest fundamental frequency of the snare kicks. And that's what allows the kick and snare to really punch through. which then allows me to also push the limiter more, knowing that it's gonna limit my kick and snare first and decrease the volume on them whilst pushing everything else up. So it's kind of like a bit of a thing that I've kind of worked on for a little while, and it kind of does help. So yeah, I have the kick and snare really exposed. You can't really hear it, but when it hits the limiter, they're the first things to hit the limiter, and that's where the gain reduction comes from. And yeah, it just seems to work. So yeah, this is basically a form of side chaining, but I use this because I find it a lot cleaner than the Ableton compressor. And yeah, that's pretty much Centipede kind of broken down.
Wicked. And I'd just like to say, well, first of all, big thanks for that. And I'd just like to say, before you all desert, that a lot of quote unquote rules were broken in this production, and it's really important that you understand what's being done before you just go off and try and emulate something, because there was a tutorial done by a producer called Audio, and he was saying how that he slammed everything into camel fat because camel fat has a built-in limiter and it's not really doing nothing. And I had various demos sent to me that absolutely sounded awful, and I asked what had gone on, and this is not the first time. There was like 3 or 4 occasions, and they said to me that they just followed that tutorial. I'm like, okay, cool, but that worked for Audio, but it's not working here. And you really need to understand what rules you're breaking and making a decision. Is it working for you? You followed something. Exactly. Like you might do what Nurve's done here and have limiters responding in a similar way, and you might have the similar plugins doing the same things, but there's 1,000,001 other process that Nurve applied to allow him to break those rules and to get it sounding good. Like you said at the end there, this wasn't compromised, that wasn't compromised, this wasn't compromised. So he was mindful throughout the whole process when breaking, again, the quote unquote rules, that it still had a good end result. So if you don't understand the processes, please spend that time in learning about compression, learning about, this style of music relies on things being crunched. It's a stylistic feature, but it's just really understanding it. And I'm sure you'll agree with that, Nurve, right?
Well, yeah, this is exactly what I was going to say. There's a reason why Audio can put the camel fat on the end of each channel, because what he's done prior to applying that has led up to him doing that. That's like the icing on the cake to him. That's not what he uses to make. That's just the icing on the cake to all the processes he's done before. And that's where people get it twisted. If you're not treating your channels in the same way as Audio's sort of done it, then when you apply the camel fat, you will probably not get the same end result. And unfortunately, when you're tampering with mastering plugins, not that camel fat it's a distortion unit, but it's got a really cool limiter on it. Because it's such a robust distortion unit, you have to have a limiter on it, the same as Trash 2 has a limiter too. But yeah, it's kind of like you have to just be careful when you're messing with like compressors and limiters and stuff, because you could quickly just destroy a track, and yeah, it's not good.
Wicked. We've literally, unfortunately, we've got 4 minutes to. I need to go to the bathroom. And then come back for this meeting. So any questions we haven't got a chance to answer, we will get back in the chat at some point, and we'll reply to them in text form. Cool. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. Please do check out www.educationandbass.online. We have nearly 2,000 music production tutorials, courses and lectures for all genres, all DAWs. Much of what you've seen today. Nurve has some extensive in-depth synthesis tutorials and loads more. We have a lot of really talented tutors on board, and there's a lot there, a lot of value for money. We're going to be doing more of this sort of stuff as well, whether we continue to do it on YouTube or go over to Twitch or whatever else, we're not sure. Please let us know in the comments whether you'd prefer Twitch, whether YouTube's cool, or actually you don't care because you're just gaining copious amounts of knowledge. Big thanks to Nurve. Check out this track, Centipede, May the 22nd on his Nurve music label. Jump on Spotify now, jump on all his socials, follow him, and go and check out the previous releases, because again, he doesn't restrict himself as an artist, but he has one priority, and that is good quality music, and I can testify that it's definitely up there. So thank you very much, Nurve. People,
big up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, big shout.
Thank you for looking in.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Till next time. Peace.